Oh, hi there. Can you pause for a moment and give yourself a pat on the back? I mean, really, give yourself a pat on the back or a high five or a handshake or one big thumbs up, because you've covered a lot of ground, just like this map. You've made your way through most of the Old Testament. Well done. You started in Eden's paradise, where God made everything good. And you were there when humanity selfishly chose its ways over God's ways, and the cycle of sin began. You heard the promises, first to Adam and Eve, that God would send a Savior, and then to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that their family would always belong to the Lord, and through them all people everywhere would be blessed. You took that detour into Egypt and saw God's people in slavery. You walked up the steep mountain of Sinai to hear Yahweh speaking from a burning bush. You made it past the plagues, the Passover, the huge walls of water marching through the heart of the Red Sea. You made it back to God's holy mountain. You felt the thunder as Yahweh spoke His perfect law, His wedding gift to keep humanity always close to Him. You wandered in the wilderness with God's people for 40 years and saw them squander their inheritance once they made it to the promised land. You saw them insist on having a king, only to end up with this string of imperfect leaders. The best ones pointed them towards Yahweh's covenant love, and the worst ones tragically drove them the other way. You saw the kingdom that the Lord was holding together with both hands crumble into two, and you watched as the Lord essentially handed His people over to defeat and exile. And you were there in Babylon, when even far from the promised land, God's people were not far from His promise, as they wait for Him to return and to make things right. That's essentially the contour of the Old Testament: creation, covenant, rescue, rebellion, exile, expectation. Following this one covenant family under the Lord's loving leadership, under His kingdom. If you've got that, you've got the narrative arc of the Old Testament story, the one that demonstrates Yahweh in both His power and His promises, that He's strong enough to do anything, and that He's faithful enough that He'll do anything to save His people. And the Lord's Old Testament people, well, they're waiting on one more big encounter with Yahweh's salvation. They're expecting a Messiah. And that's where the New Testament picks up. But you know, to get through the whole Old Testament in 11 weeks worth of lessons, we had to skip around a little bit. We talked about Jacob, but not about his rivalry with his brother Esau. We talked about David, but not about his friendship with his best friend Jonathan, or about his grandmother Ruth. We met Daniel, but we skipped the story of his best friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I point this out for one big reason, because there's a lot more of the Bible to discover. Yes, you've got this big picture overview: creation, covenant, rescue, rebellion, exile, and expectation. But there's still Rahab, the unlikely ally who helped Israel infiltrate enemy territory. There's still the amazing chariot of fire that whisks the prophet Elijah away to heaven. Or there's still Jonah spending 3 days sleeping on fish guts. It's good to get the big picture, but it's good to stop and savor the details too. So that's what we're going to be doing on the next 2 weeks. We're still on this road trip, this adventure through the Old Testament, but this time we're going to slow down and see the sights. Spend our time taking in the details, the scenery of this one particular story, seeing how it unfolds from start to finish. And it's the story of the Lord's heroic queen. See you in just a minute.